The Jaguar launched with 3 games. The pack-in Cybermorph, a port of Tecmo's Raiden, and this, Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy. I didn't want to start with Cybermorph because, frankly, we all know the meme. Raiden was a relatively popular game, and I'm actually due to talk about the PC Engine version in a couple of months. Which means Trevor McFur is the least known, least popular of the 3. A perfect place for me to begin Jaguar coverage. Something that you might have noticed about those 3 games is that they're all shoot-'em-ups. 3 different styles of shooters, but all shooters. When the Jaguar launched in the winter of 1993, the heyday of the shoot-'em-up was over. Popularity of the genre fell off a cliff in 1991. There was a new genre that was dominating players' attentions, and it would take a full year before the Jaguar had a fighting game. My point here is that regardless of the qualities of Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy, even if it was one of the all-time greatest shoot-'em-ups, in 1993, it would make the Jaguar look old and out of fashion. And Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy is pretty far from one of the better shoot-'em-ups. You play as Trevor McFur, a guy with the head of a bored Jaguar. As a hotshot ace space pilot, you're called in to deal with an alien invasion. When you start the game, you're given your choice of 4 planets to fly to, with a 5th one in the center locked until you complete the other 4. Each of those 4 planets consists of a space stage, then a level where you're flying around the planet itself, and finally a bonus stage where you fly through rings in order to rack up some additional power-ups. At this point, I have to talk about the presentation in Trevor McFur. I often skim over that in these cataloging videos because, well, you can see and hear it. This is a video, you don't need me to tell you what the graphics look like. But the visual and audio design here are especially bad. The audio is easier to talk about because there is none. Music only plays over the menu. Even the sound effects are puny. All of the explosion sound effects are really muted. The weapon shots are puny. This is a game that sounds bad. And then we come to the visuals. Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy is from that brief period that followed in the wake of Terminator 2 and Jurassic Park, where game developers went 3D rendered graphics are the future, but consoles couldn't do them natively, and the artistic and design talent to make them look good didn't exist within the developers yet. And so this game is packed with designs that are essentially my first render.blend. I mean, this enemy is literally just the textured ball that you would use to examine lighting effects. The detail and lighting is so poor on these that I suspect the work was done on PCs of the era rather than Silicon graphics workstations, which were the high-end 3D systems of the day. Compare the graphics used in Trevor McFur with those in Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country admittedly came a year later, but it was still working from the same principles of rendering all of its graphics in advance, and then using the results as 2D sprites and backgrounds. Visually, Trevor McFur is amateurish. Now that said, there are some good bits. This swamp planet, for example, I think looks pretty good. Probably because the environment is hand-drawn instead of 3D rendered. On the other hand, you have stuff like this planet. What's this place even supposed to be? It doesn't fit thematically with anything. And here on this ice world, you have a bunch of spikes whose hitbox doesn't match the visuals. Trevor McFur is actually kind of inconsistent about terrain collisions. On the desert planet and the swamp planet, you can't hit anything. But on the ice planet and on the, whatever this planet's supposed to be, you can ram into background objects. How do you know what you can pass through and what will kill you? Well, mainly by running into it. Enemies and their shots can freely pass through anything, so you don't have any context clues there. It's just another case of really shoddy visual design on the part of Trevor McFur. And then we get into the gameplay. And I'm sorry to say, but we're not really improving here. Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy plays like a shoot-'em-up by somebody who doesn't play shoot-'em-ups. What I mean by that is, sometimes with genres, someone will swagger in and go, I can make one of these easy, despite not engaging with the genre in any kind of meaningful way. They know the outline, but not the structure. And inevitably, the result in these situations is that they fall into every cliche and make every mistake that those who regularly work with the genre learned hard lessons over. Trevor McFur in the Crescent Galaxy plays like a mid-level shooter from 1986. It has boring weapons, bosses whose patterns are shoot two different kinds of bullets directly at where you are, and the stages are laid out in a way that feels random. There's no exciting set pieces, no big mid-bosses, no escalation as you progress. It's just shoot down randomly placed waves of enemies until eventually the game stops scrolling, goes to a text screen that doesn't matter at all, and then the simplistically designed boss strolls in. If the bosses didn't move in a circular pattern crowding you to the edge of the screen, then they probably would never be able to shoot you at all. Their biggest advantage is a health bar that takes forever to chew through. And since they're good enough to show you that health bar, you get to feel even weaker as you shoot them over and over again and watch it barely move. As a shoot 'em up, Trevor McFur in the Crescent Galaxy would feel horribly primitive to anybody who'd played anything since, well, Gradius. Getting into the nitty-gritty of the mechanics here, you have one button that fires your main gun, one that drops bombs, though the general lack of ground targets makes that weapon seem superfluous, and you have one button to fire a special weapon. Now, if you're playing on the original Jaguar, which special weapon you're using is selected by the number pad on the controller. Here I'm playing the version on the Atari 50 collection, and they've modified the game so that it rotates through the special weapons when you press a button on your controller. Neither control scheme is especially intuitive. You either have to look away from the screen and down at the overlay for which of the 9 buttons to press, or you mash the button and watch the upper left-hand corner of the screen until you eventually get to the weapon you wanted. The special weapons all have their own ammunition, and all power-ups, including that ammo, drop from various ships. It's not that there's one particular ship that drops something. It's just that there's certain enemies that will drop something. What they drop will be randomized, so you can't plan for anything. And you get so much ammunition for special weapons that you might as well just keep using them. You automatically switch to a special weapon when you pick up ammunition for it, so that's yet another consideration as you're trying to handle those. The upgrades for your main weapon look like either one big dot or 2 small dots. They wind up doing effectively the same thing. First they change your default shot to match that icon, and then your attack becomes a crescent beam, which grows larger as you collect more weapon upgrades. The bomb can be upgraded once by collecting an icon that looks like a little swirl. It just changes shape and does a bit more damage. The bees are bonus points, and then we come to the special weapons, most of which are one quick shot and then they're over. So that's why the footage here is going to be a bit disjointed. The magnet shot pulls all enemies into it and destroys them. This also means that it will pull an enemy through you to it. The tracer is a bouncing shot that heads straight towards one enemy and then bounces directly towards the next. Beam fires a large continuous shot out of the top of your ship. It's not that much more effective than your regular gun. Flash just destroys all enemies on the screen, and Missile travels a short distance, then makes a big explosion. It's nearly useless on the regular stages, but against a boss, the explosion lingers and does a lot of damage over time. The ring fires a pod that circles your ship for a few seconds, destroying anything that comes close. Bolt fires an expanding beam out in front of your ship. The shield does exactly what you'd expect, and you become invincible for about 10 seconds. And finally, Cutter will summon your girlfriend, who will fly another ship in and shoot for a little while. Those are a lot of special weapons to keep track of, and like I said, you might as well just use them when you get them. It's not like you can easily handle deploying them in particular circumstances. Naturally, getting hit by anything will destroy you instantly, and then you reappear in the exact same spot instantly. It's a bizarre choice to not even break the flow when you die. And when you get a game over, well, you've got 5 continues, and the game over screen doesn't time out. You have to reset the console if you want to start over. Just one more bizarre design choice here. Now, by all accounts, a lot of the issues in Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy come down to not having any time at all for development. It looks, sounds, and plays like a prototype because it is. I'm not sure that you could polish this one up enough to make it a good game, but it had zero chance. Time has not been kind to Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy. The only people who seem to have any kind words about it at all are those who have nostalgia for it. As a launch title for Atari's big new platform, it's hard to see Trevor McFur as anything other than an unmitigated disaster. Even when the launch games aren't good, and they often aren't, ideally they would be showing off some aspect of the system. It needs to give you some kind of wow factor that makes you want to show it off to everybody else, and then makes them want to go out and get the system. This is a worse version of what you could already get on the Super Nintendo or Genesis, or even the TurboGrafx 16, even if that platform's fate in the US was about equal with the Jaguar. You can't launch a new system with games that are worse versions of things that people played years ago. That's just setting up your system for failure.